Hey everybody, it's Derek Martin from CodeOpinion.com, and today we're going to take a look at Cake, which enables you to write build scripts in C#. First, let's talk about why you want to build script. For me, there are two major benefits. The first is it allows you to build from anywhere. No longer are you relying on the build server such as TeamCity or Jenkins, which contains all your build configuration. The second is source control. Since your build is now in code, it can live right alongside your application in source control. That means if you have the source, you can make a build. It's really easy to get started with Cake. I've created a demo app that's available on GitHub. It contains a basic Hello World application, and alongside that is the Cake build script that I'll describe in the rest of this video. What I have open here is the working directory for our demo application. This is the Cake demo that I have available on GitHub. You can see we have an SRC folder, which is our solution and tests. So what we need to do now is download the Cake PowerShell Build script. We can do so with PowerShell itself. So if I go into PowerShell, I can use the invoke web request to download that script. Now we can see we have our build PS1. So now that we have our PowerShell script, we can actually create our C# Cake script, which we will call build.cake, and we will put it right alongside this build PS1 PowerShell script. So let's create a new file called build.cake, and let's open this up with Visual Studio Code. So there's an extension for Cake, which I highly recommend installing, as it gives syntax highlighting, etc., which is really useful for when you're actually working with your Cake scripts. So the first task that we want to run in our Cake script is just to run MSBuild on our solution. So the first thing we have to do is create a argument. We'll see what this is for in a bit. So let's create a target, which is going to be our default task. So let's create a default task that is going to run MSBuild. So Cake has a pile of built-in tasks that you can execute. You can check out the documentation on the Cake site. So for this particular example, I'm going to be using the MSBuild task, and I can specify that our Cake demo solution is what I actually want to build here. And now we can actually run this particular task. So what our code's defining here is our default task, what it does, which is running MSBuild on our solution. And we call run target. We're basically specifying this argument, which is our target's going to be our default task. So now that we have our Cake script, let's run it from PowerShell. So if we go back to our PowerShell window, let's clear this out. We now have our PowerShell script build PS1, which we're going to actually execute. So you can see this is going to be downloading any packages for Cake itself. And we can see that our build succeeded and how long it actually took. So if we just take a peek at our source directory again, we can see that we built this as a solution. So if we look at bin debug, which was what we just did, here's our outputting files. All right, so let's jump back to Visual Studio Code and our Cake script. So one other thing that I wanted to do, just to give you a flavor of other tasks that you can run, is I do have a unit test with XUnit in this Cake demo project that I have. So I just wanted to give an example of something that you would commonly do on your build server, which is also run these unit tests. So what we need to do is Cake has a way of using external tools. So what we need to do in the top of our file is tell Cake what tool we actually need to use. For this particular case with XUnit, I want to use the console runner so that it will actually run these actual tests since we're not using Visual Studio or anything external. So from here, what I can do is create another task. Let's call this XUnit. And what it's going to be, you can specify dependencies between given tasks, and this XUnit test is going to be dependent on our default task. So we'll say is dependent default. And what does it do? We're going to call xunit2 on our cake demo.tests. So what we have here is we created a new task called xunit, which is dependent on our default task. So what I actually want to do here is I'm going to rename our default task to, let's call this actually, what it does is build. And let's create another task, which is going to be our default task. Which is going to be dependent on xunit. So what we really defined here is that our default task is going to be dependent on xunit, and xunit is going to be dependent on our build. So let's give this a shot, and we should see our build happen, and then our xunit tests run. So to run this, let's fire up PowerShell again. Let's clear this out. Let's rerun our build. So this should download XUnit and execute our tests, which it did. So we see we have a succeeding build, and here was our XUnit running with one test and the total length of time it took to run everything. So that's it for our little demo app that's using our Cake script to run MSBuild in XUnit. Hope this gave a little bit of flavor of what you can do with Cake. I highly recommend you check it out and check out the documentation for all the built-in tasks that you can run, including cool things like NuGet and Octopus Deploy. One thing to note here as well is what you'd be doing with Cake is invoking it from your build server, say TeamCity or Jenkins. Instead of having all those build configurations, all these build steps that I've done specified specifically in your build server, what you'd be doing now is having your Cake script define those tasks and then having your build server invoke Cake, just to clarify what the actual step process here would be with your build server. Hope you'd enjoyed this video. Subscribe for other .NET related topics and videos, and please check out my blog at codeopinion.com. Thanks.